Redeem Academy.
Yo, what's up science squirrels? My name is Johnny. This is Redeem Academy. I'm here to help you get the most out of your education while giving God all the glory. Today's lesson is about microbiology. Big question today. How did Leeuwenhoek and Semmelweis change our understanding of the unseen world? So I'm going to be telling you about two guys today, Antonie van Leeuwenhoek, that's a mouthful, and Ignaz Semmelweis. Here is van Leeuwenhoek. Let's add some color to van Leeuwenhoek. All right, so a little about Leeuwenhoek.
Antonie van Leeuwenhoek.
Antonie van Leeuwenhoek.
Leeuwenhoek, the microscope guy.
Antonie van Leeuwenhoek taught himself glassmaking.
Of Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who heard about these microscope doohickeys, and instead of going out and buying one, he decided to make his own.
Oh my gosh, Leeuwenhoek, the microscope guy. He got a drop of pond water, puts it under his microscope, just to think to do this. It's just water. Why do you think that's something interesting to do? He said, I wonder. He was curious. He puts it under and sees what he described as animalcules, happily a-swimming. Animalcules. These are like the amoebas in Paramecia. And so he reports on this to the scientific authorities, and they don't believe him. They say, Van Leeuwenhoek, we think you might have had too much gin before you wrote this letter. Why would anyone believe this? That there's entire creatures, an entire universe of creatures thriving in a drop of pond water.
An entire universe of creatures thriving in a drop of pond water. So check out the background on Leeuwenhoek. He was not a scientist at all.
Microbes are in us, on us, and all around us. They have a wide range of functions. They can cause the decay of materials, ferment sugar to make wine, and produce antibiotics. But did you know the discoverer of microbes wasn't a scientist? He was a draper. Drapers used magnifying glasses to inspect the quality of their fabrics.
Did you catch that? So Leeuwenhoek is a draper. A draper is someone who inspects cloth to make clothes out of it. So in this video, they've got Leeuwenhoek using a magnifying glass to look at clothing. Magnifying glasses use lenses. Lenses are like pieces of glass that are curved. They have little curves to them so that they can increase the size of objects.
Antonie van Leeuwenhoek was a draper and merchant who, unhappy with those lenses, taught himself glassmaking. He created high-quality tiny glass spheres that could magnify objects up to 270 times. His microscopes were less than 2 inches long and were used by holding one's eye close to the tiny lens and looking at a sample suspended on a pin. As a good merchant, he knew to keep his microscope secret, but that wouldn't be possible for long. Van Leeuwenhoek was a curious man, so he started analyzing anything he could get his hands on. He sent his discoveries on mold, lice and bees to the Royal Society in London, who were familiar with similar work. However, his next discovery caused the scientists to question his credibility, as it was something completely unknown to them. Van Leeuwenhoek had come upon an infinity of tiny animals in pond water, which he called animalcules.
Isn't that a great name? Animalcules. Animalcules. So he takes two words. He takes the word animals, he takes the word molecules, and he just shoves them together. They're animalcules. So this funny looking thing right here is his microscope. And he wasn't the first person to try to invent a microscope, but he was the first person to really make it able to see microscopic things. So over here under Van Leeuwenhoek, we include him as, I'm gonna drop his van and just put Leeuwenhoek. And he is considered the father of microbiology because he was the first person to observe microorganisms, which mostly we just call them microbes for short. And he called them animalcules, okay? And so tiny living things too small to be seen with the naked eye, which include bacteria, fungi, protists, viruses, things like that. They're called microorganisms or microbes for short. Okay? And so Leeuwenhoek wasn't the inventor of the microscope, but he greatly improved its design, the microscope. So with the invention of the microscope, Leeuwenhoek opened up a whole realm of biology that nobody had ever studied before. And we're going to go through 3 basic categories of living things that you can see under a microscope. And we're going to get some really great images of those today and videos and look at them. All right, 3 types of microbes. The first one we're going to look at is protists. All right, we're going to take a lot of time to watch some videos from this YouTube channel called Journey to the Microcosmos. Amazing footage. These guys get really talented scientists. Unfortunately, they have a major evolutionary bias like a lot of scientists do. So I'll maneuver us around some of that. But in case you're curious, really cool channel, but there can be a strong dogma about evolution in their videos.
In the year 1675, I discovered very small living creatures in rainwater, which had stood but few days in a new earthen pot, glazed blue within. Those are the famous words that Antonie van Leeuwenhoek used to describe microbes. Though he didn't use the word microbe, he called them animalcules.
Okay, here we go. Oh wait, can't see them.
And the letter itself is not
Okay,
exact.
these two guys right here that are moving around. So this big guy right here, I have really good penmanship. This guy right here are both 200 times their normal size. And so they're using, I actually have a microscope. Hold on one second. Okay, so this is your typical high school, middle school microscope. You can probably buy one of these on Amazon for $200, which is kind of a lot of money. Maybe they rent them at the library, I don't know. But this lens right here is a 10x lens. And so this magnifies the image by 10. And then these lenses down here rotate and will multiply times that 10. So this little guy right here is a 4x lens. Let me get it under my camera. So if your sample's right here, this red one has a 4 on it, so it's 10 times 4, so that'd be a 40 magnification. This is a 10, so this would be 100 magnification if you look at this. The next one is a 40, so 40 times is 400. And then this one, notice how it says oil on it. You gotta put oil between the slide and the lens, and that would be 1,000 magnification. So it's pretty common to look at things on the 10x magnification, or the 40x is pretty high power, and the 1000x is like almost impossible to see things unless they're really small. When we look at these videos, these folks are professional. They've got their lighting set up just right. They might be staining things, although this image we're looking at here, I'm not sure there's much stain, but they have backlighting and side lighting. And then somehow they're getting all these cool protists to grow and stay alive in their lab. And so I've never seen things this clear and this nice, the way we're gonna see these things in these videos. Here's a great clip right here of paramecium swimming around a big ball of bacteria. And so bacteria are way smaller than paramecium, so that must be millions of bacteria, and then those are paramecium moving all around. Paramecium are a type of protist. Here's a colony of ciliates, so a bunch of protists that can swim, little arms or hairs that are all over their body, though they don't seem to be moving very much in that video. Oh, this is like my favorite, an amoeba. It literally moves like a blob. It just slowly secretes itself across something and can surround what it's eating. Okay, here's another amoeba. So amoebas, they just slither across things. What's really cool is if we can find a video, I'm gonna look for one, of an amoeba surrounding its prey and engulfing it. Oh, here we go. This is when an amoeba is, it's called phagocytosis. That's a funny name. So it's gonna surround that diatom, which is a little photosynthetic algae. It's gonna surround it, engulf it, and eat it. I think there's a game my kids used to play called Agario that was basically this, if you've ever played that game. That was cool. Here's one called a rotifer. It's got really funny feet that anchor it to things, and then you can see it's trying to like draw in its food through its mouth. That's its mouth right there. I think those might be light-sensitive eyes on the front. I'm not really sure. Something else swimming next to it. And so this is a pretty big protozoan or protist. There you go. Those are its feet, I think. And so it's anchored to the ground, and it's anchored like with that foot right there, and it's got like 2 toes that are like somehow connected to that blob that it's connected to. And then it's able to anchor itself there and then basically just kind of suck water in and try to suck in its food through its mouth. All right, this is a ciliate, and so it uses like hairs to swim. And I think it's a single cellular organism, and so it just swims around with those hairs and can really get moving pretty quick and then go find food with that. Okay, now this is a tardigrade, and I think it's called like a water bear or a moss bear. And they're, I think, actually in the animal kingdom, multicellular, and they are the funniest little creatures. They've got like claws and feet, and they're super hard to kill. Really interesting creatures. They've got like a funnel on their mouth. And I don't think they have eyes. Maybe they have like light-sensitive eye spots. Weird little creatures. All right, so that's a taste of the protists. The protists are almost like the other category in biology. Like they're not bacteria, they're not a fungus, they're not an animal. They used to be in the animal kingdom, but they're just sort of the other category of microscopic things. The one defining characteristic of protists is that they have a nucleus. So they're microscopic and they have a nucleus. Occasionally they actually can be multicellular and they can actually be visible. There are these things called slime molds that are protists. But for the most part, protists are single cellular organisms that have a nucleus. So this little bag right here represents their nucleus. Now you should probably be asking the question, what's a nucleus? This is like second, third day of biology. What's a nucleus? A nucleus is a covering where you put your DNA. So I like to call it underwear, okay? So what do we as humans have that it's like a covering for our most private information? We put underwear on, okay? So protists wear underwear, okay? So do all animals and all plants, and so do fungi, and protists. Bacteria are the other two kingdoms that do not wear underwear. So you're gonna see bacteria, they go commando. They do not wear underwear. So let's write their name down now, bacteria. And let's look at a few examples of bacteria. This is a great one.
You may not want to think about it this way, but your mouth is really just one giant wet cave for microbes.
A giant wet cave for microbes. Totally true. What do most microorganisms want? They want dark, they want warm, and they want wet. Your mouth and your armpits, two really good places for microbes to grow.
We need to extend a big thank you to Ella, a friend of our master of microscopes. Ella kindly ate a lot of sugary food and skipped brushing her teeth for 2 days to make this video possible.
I'm pretty sure most middle school boys would have done that for free.
My mouth is totally gross and perfect for sampling. The result was this: tartar and plaque scraped off her gums and the spaces between her teeth.
Now, a couple things here. One, I remember learning this in maybe high school biology and just being amazed. Your whole life you've been told sugar causes cavities. Sugar does not directly cause cavities at all. Sugar does not cause holes to form in your teeth. A cavity is a hole. Sugar causes bacteria to grow. Bacteria secrete acid. Acid puts holes in your teeth. So acid causes cavities. Acid comes from bacteria. Bacteria eat sugar. So you cut off the food supply, the bacteria don't grow, you don't get holes in your teeth. One other thing to notice is look at the magnification on this video. These are bacterial cells. This is plaque, bacterial cells. So plaque is just a colony of bacteria all over your teeth. And this is zoomed in at 630x. Most of the videos we watched before were at 200x. So protists are big. You can see them at 200x. At 630x, you can't really see the bacterial cells individually. You just see whole groups of them. It looks all fuzzy because this is thousands of bacterial cells. So bacteria are much smaller than protists.
Within these samples, you can see dense populations of bacteria, some of which move around quite a bit, like the corkscrew-shaped spirochetes here.
What's even more gross is that some of the bacteria that are growing in your mouth, on your teeth, like this guy right here, there are corkscrew-shaped bacteria that has flagella, little things like cilia but longer, that whip around and allow it to move. I'm gonna go find a better video of one of those. Okay, here's a little bit cleaner video of just this type of bacteria. You can see them just moving around like snakes in your mouth. They have this thing on their tails called a flagella, or on their ends called a flagella, and they can just wiggle through the saliva in your mouth. Look at those things go. Oh, it's in your mouth all the time.
As is so often the case, the microscopist Antonie van Leeuwenhoek got there long before we did. In 1677, he published a paper documenting the little animalcules he observed under the microscope. Among his many illustrations and depictions,
Leeuwenhoek's drawing, I love this. He even drew that one of the things he found in his mouth could move. This guy was so on top of it. And the little tiny thing he put up to his eye, I mean, if you had one of these and you tried to actually look at something, you wouldn't even be able to use the thing. But somehow he was so into it, he figured out how to use this thing really well. Okay, now I didn't know this, but from watching this video, I learned we actually have that little guy swimming around right there. That is a protist. So we don't just harbor bacteria in our mouth. I thought we just had bacteria in our mouth. We also harbor certain protists in our mouth. And the next protist they're going to show us is actually named after gingivitis. And they think that that may be part of the reason people get gingivitis, which is inflammation of the gums, is these little guys. That's his name right there, entamoeba. It's an amoeba. Oh my gosh, entamoeba gingivitis. And that when you have this particular protist, let me show you what I'm talking about here. When you have this little amoeba right here in your mouth, that actually may be part of the cause of gingivitis. Gah! After I watched this video the first time, first thing I went and did, brush my teeth. All right, before we get too freaked out, it's important to realize that the vast majority of bacteria that are all over us right now are actually good bacteria. It's actually good for your skin to be covered in bacteria all the time. It's good for your mouth to be covered in good bacteria all the time because it keeps the bad stuff out. So as much as it might freak you out to think that there's bacteria inside your mouth, there's bacteria and there's bacteria all the way through you, all the way out your butt. The bacteria in your gut is called your microbiome, and it helps you digest your food, and they're discovering more and more that there's a function to the bacteria in your stomach keeping you healthy. And so God created bacteria, and they primarily serve good purposes. Something like 90% of bacteria are good bacteria. And depending on how you interpret the fall in Genesis, it's possible that bacteria since the fall have become corrupted, and not all bacteria serve good purposes anymore. So don't be afraid of bacteria. They're a normal part of our lives. We got to have them all over us. The only time you don't want bacteria in you is when you have surgery or something. You don't want them getting into your blood. So our blood, the inside of our body, is bacteria free, and we have an immune system to keep bacteria out. All right, let's start getting some of these words written down. So what we've been talking about is called microbiology. And we were first talking about protists. Protists are the microscopic organisms that have a nucleus and are usually single cellular. Then we have single cellular living things that lack a nucleus. Those are the bacteria. And finally, we're going to talk about the fungi.
You've probably gone through something like this before. You have a loaf of bread sitting around waiting to be eaten, and you fully intend to eat it. You might even have had the perfect sandwich in mind, but then you go grab some slices, and you notice that someone, or something, got to it first. It's the mold. The dreaded hairy patches of black, blue, green, and gray expanding like a circular lawn, intent on taking over your bread.
Sporium.
It seems to come out of nowhere, but once it arrives, there is no getting rid of it.
Ooh, look at that name. Penicillium. This is where we get penicillin, the first antibiotic that was discovered. It's a substance that comes from this fungus. So fungus is used to defeat bacteria.
And fungi are not like us. They can't just go to the store to pick up a loaf of bread. They can, however, travel, flying through the air or swimming through water as spores. These spores are kind of like seeds waiting for the right combination of temperature, acidity, and moisture to take root. And for some lucky spores, bread can potentially provide those conditions, especially pre-sliced bread.
Okay, so spores are like, I remember as a kid, I'd sit in my living room in the morning and the sun would be coming in the window and there'd be all this like, these tiny particles floating around. Some of that's dead skin cells. Some of that is probably fungal spores. So on the bottom side of a mushroom, there's these things that release spores. I forget what they're called. And literally it's like tiny pieces of dust that can grow into more mushrooms or whatever kind of fungus it is. They're like tiny little flakes of new cells that can grow into new fungus. Okay, so this is like a chain of fungal cells. And each cell has its own nucleus, and it slowly grows in one direction or the other direction and makes a chain of cells. This is one style of fungus. This is probably the main way funguses grow. And they can grow in your grass underground, or they can grow on your bread, and they just kind of form these this stuff, and I think it's called mycelium, but one cell is called a hypha, and then multiple cells called hyphae, and they're almost spelled exactly the same. So this is an example of a fungus.
Sometimes the hyphae form branches of their own, and sometimes they will fuse with one another. The result is a web of hyphae called the mycelium. But the mycelium is not just a matter of spreading. It's a network that acts as a feeding apparatus. The hyphae will secrete enzymes into the bread around it, breaking down its nutrients so that the fungus can eat. It's basically just a really large network of mouths. This makes for a frustrating sight when looking at our despondent, gross slices of bread.
Okay, so that's kind of cool, bread mold, but now I have to tell you about my favorite fungus, which is the zombie parasite fungus that infects bugs. Check this out.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungles. Few are more successful than the ants. There can be 8 million individuals in a single hectare. But jungle ants don't have it all their own way.
Poor ant.
These bullet ants are showing some worrying symptoms. Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Then, utterly disorientated, it grips a stem with its mandibles. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony.
Isn't it crazy?
It seems extreme.
They even detect it and dump the body.
Reason why. Like something out of science fiction,
So that's
the floating body of the
mycelium.
cordyceps erupts from the ant's head.
Mycelium, the fungal body, grows out of the ant's head. So the spores got into the ant's body and then grew a new mushroom
It can take 3 weeks to grow.
that came
And
out
when
of the
finished,
ant.
the deadly spores will burst from its tip. Then any ant in the vicinity will be in serious risk of death.
Crazy life cycle. So he gets infected with a spore. The spore grows inside of his brain, and somehow even he's programmed by this spore to go clamp onto a branch up high. Then he grows a new mushroom. I mean, I don't know if it's much of a mushroom, but something like a mushroom grows out the top, and then out of the tip of this, more spores are going to be released to infect more ants. Crazy!
The fungus is so virulent, it can wipe out whole colonies of ants. And it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer.
Look at this.
There are literally
I think that's a
thousands
grasshopper.
of different types of cordyceps fungi, and remarkably, each specializes on just one species.
Each species of cordyceps affects one type of insect. That's a grasshopper. What's next? It's cool the way they pan through and it switches to the next insect. Check this out. Branch gets in the way. Oh, now it's a new dead insect. I think that's a spider. All spiders deserve to die. I hate spiders. Moth. That is a dead moth. And finally,
But these
last
attacks
one.
do have a positive effect on the jungle's diversity, since
Stick
parasites
bug.
like these
Oh,
stop
come
any
on,
one group
stick
of animal
bugs.
getting the upper hand. The more
Tragedy. Crazy. Oh, and the most important fungus of all, yeast. Without yeast, we couldn't have pizza. One of God's greatest gifts to mankind. Domino's Deep Dish, not a sponsor yet. All right, so here are the fungi. That's plural for fungus, singular. So Leeuwenhoek had a great life. He lived to 90 years old. For a guy in the 1700s, that was legendary. Probably because he kept his mind sharp. He was super nerdy and interested in stuff, which is the way to be. Just be curious. Our next guy has a very sad story. He's on the right side of history, but he died before he ever found out that what he did worked. His name is Ignaz Semmelweis. Let's add some color to him. All right, we got a little clip about Semmelweis.
You've probably never heard his name, but Ignaz Semmelweis? He changed medicine forever and saved millions of lives. In the 1800s, hospitals were terrifying. Mothers giving birth were dying, and no one knew why. At Vienna's first obstetrical clinic, young Dr. Semmelweis noticed something disturbing. Doctors were delivering babies right after dissecting corpses without washing their hands. He had a bold idea. What if invisible particles from the dead were infecting the living?
Okay, couple things. One, how good would I look with one of those mustaches? Yes. Two, childbirth was extremely dangerous throughout human history. Just like until 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 75 years ago, it was really dangerous to die in childbirth. In his hospital, early 1800s, mid 1800s, doctors are training in his hospital with cadavers. So they're working on dead bodies, and these aren't preserved yet. And so they're literally touching bodies that are slowly rotting and have microorganisms growing all over them, rotting and eating the flesh. Ew. This is not a good way to do cadavers. And then they would go and they would deliver babies. Ah! And so one of his friends, who's a doctor, cuts his finger and gets the same kind of infection that these mothers are dying from after childbirth. And it turns out it's called sepsis, where you get an infection in your blood from what he called cadaverous particles, cadaver particles, which are really just bacteria that eat human flesh. And so you get the infection in your blood, it goes throughout your whole body, and you die of sepsis, an infection in your blood. So he gets this idea that I think people have some particle on themselves that is transferring to the mother when they deliver the babies.
In 1847, he ordered doctors to wash their hands with a chlorinated lime solution. The result? Staggering. Maternal deaths dropped from 18% to under 2%. Hand washing, something so simple, was saving lives.
So it totally works. And he also noticed that the doctors were the ones who were delivering some of the babies, but there were another group of people called midwives who were delivering babies, and they weren't working on cadavers. Their mothers, who they were delivering with, were at 2% to begin with. They had only a 2% death rate, but when the doctors were doing it, they had an 18% death rate. And so Semmelweis said, hey, I think the doctors are causing the problem here. As soon as he makes his doctors wash their hands with chlorinated lime, chlorine, it's like bleach. As soon as he makes his doctors wash their hands with bleach, their number goes down to 2%, which was the same number the midwives were at. Now, imagine living in a world today like that. You have a 1 out of 50 chance of death from having a baby. We live in a much easier, safer world today.
But here's the twist. No one believed him. Germ theory didn't exist yet. So Semmelweis was mocked, discredited, even driven out of his position. His frustration grew. His mental health declined. He kept fighting for the truth, but the world wouldn't listen. In the end, he was committed to an asylum. He died at just 47, alone, broken, and nearly forgotten. Years later, germ theory finally proved him right, and only then did the world realize what he had done. Today, hand hygiene is a basic part of medicine, and it all started with one man who saw what others didn't. So the next time you wash your hands, remember Ignaz Semmelweis, the forgotten genius who saved millions of lives.
Really sad story, and just to make it even more ironic, he died of an infection, probably sepsis, after they think he got beat up by the guards when he was in that insane asylum, because he was struggling so much with anxiety and frustration over the fact that people wouldn't listen to him because they didn't yet understand that germs cause disease. So here's a review of his experiment. Dr. Semmelweis instituted a hand-washing protocol in his hospital after noticing that medical students were treating mothers after working on cadavers. He also noticed midwives had much lower post-birth death rates, 2%, than medical students, 18%. So the variable that he manipulated in his experiment, he was doing real empirical science here, was hand washing. And the responding variable that he measured, think about it, what was he measuring? He was measuring post-birth death rate. Today, he's known as the savior of mothers. He worked drastically to reduce death rates. That's Semmelweis. There's a whole university named after him now. His research laid the groundwork for the germ theory of disease. The germ theory of disease is the idea that a microorganism can cause a disease. And today it's like common knowledge. Oh, do you have a virus? Do you have an infection? But back then, nobody understood this stuff yet. And so Leeuwenhoek had just invented the microscope 100 years earlier, and scientists hadn't connected the idea that microorganisms could cause diseases yet. And so Semmelweis had basically done an experiment that showed it was possible, but people didn't want to listen to him yet. And doctors were resistant to the idea of washing their hands. Doctors were appalled by the idea that they could be making their patients sick. And so people didn't listen to his ideas. But later on, in the next 50 years, I think just a few years after his death, a few other scientists with also knowledge of Semmelweis's work, were able to come up with the germ theory of disease and realize that microorganisms cause infections. And this tendency of people to reject new evidence because it contradicts the established norms has been named in the scientific community a Semmelweis reflex. And as Christians, a Semmelweis reflex is oftentimes what we face when we try to share things with people that they don't want to hear. And so it's hard. I've so often wanted to share with people about Jesus or try to share it with people about Jesus. People are resistant to the gospel a lot of times. And, it's interesting to try to find ways to get people to listen to what you have to say. And Semmelweis is like a perfect example of like, hey, I've got something really valuable for you that I need to tell you for your good. And people are resistant to hearing it. And it's so tough to deal with that, and you have to love people. You have to be sympathetic to where they're at, but also you need to speak the truth. And so what Semmelweis struggled through is something that we as Christians struggle through as well. How do I tell you the truth and not back down when it's something you need to hear, but also say it in a way that you're able to hear it? And that's definitely an art form as Christians, that we have to learn how to speak the truth and do it in love, but also do it with boldness. Big question today that you have to answer is, how did Leeuwenhoek and Semmelweis change our understanding of the unseen world? There's an unseen world, and part of it, in their day was microbes. Nobody knew about microbes until these guys and others did the work they did. So they gave people an understanding that things that you can't see, microbes, affect you. And Leeuwenhoek did it through the invention of the microscope and being able to see tiny organisms smaller than the head of a pin. Semmelweis did it through an experiment that required people to realize there's something microscopic that we're transmitting on our hands that's affecting our patients and their infections, And there's also other parts of the world spiritually that are unseen to us that affect us. The unseen world. There's a whole unseen realm spiritually out there too that we can't measure scientifically, but that we know it's there. We can feel it with our soul, and we can see its effects through prayer, through Scripture, and just through God's involvement in the world. Just as a Christian, it's so important to be mindful of the spiritual realm around us as well. Hey, I thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed getting a little glimpse into the microbial world, and pray you'll come back next time for the next episode. Have a great day.